you're driving around your truck, your company truck, whatever it is. Yes, it's a nice free billboard to be able to have, but hey, don't forget you're recruiting for your organization as well, right?
Welcome to the Roots of Success, the premier landscapers podcast that brings you the latest tips and strategies for successful landscape business. I'm Jim Calley, one of the principals and coaches of McFarland Stanford. Jason New and I started McFarland Stanford to coach landscape businesses after years in the industry ourselves. Now, more than 10 years since we began, McFarland has a deep bench of coaches and subject matter experts who work with our clients on very specific issues of business. Whether you're struggling with people, profits, or just day-to-day challenges, our coaches and guests have the real-world experience and practical advice to help you build a thriving and profitable landscape business.
Welcome to Roots of Success, the premier landscapers podcast that brings you the latest tips and strategies for building a thriving landscaping business. My name is Barrett Chow. I'm one of the hosts and coaches at McFarland Stanford. My whole career has been in the HR space, spanning multiple industries, but it was my time as a McFarland Stanford client that ultimately inspired me to step into coaching. I found my greatest success in the green industry, and that hands-on experience with building teams, managing growth, and solving challenges shapes the way I work and coach today. At McFarland Stanford, I serve as an executive coach, director of recruiting, and lead our HR practice. While recruiting remains a core focus of my work, I also collaborate with a deep bench of coaches to help our clients solve complex challenges within their business. One of the best parts of my role in facilitating ACE peer groups is meeting the amazing people who help these businesses succeed. Today, I'm joined by long-term friend Nubia Gutierrez, CEO of HR in Bloom. And I can't wait to have her tell her story, and we got some great stuff to dive into today. So Nubia, introduce yourself and we'll get going.
First of all, thank you for having me, Barrett. I appreciate it. So my name is Nubia Gutierrez, and I am the CEO and founder of HR in Bloom. Prior to that, I had a little bit over 9 years of experience in the landscape industry. I recently decided to start my own consultant and HR business and just helping different industries from a wide range with any sort of HR issues or consultant or task, whatever that may be. Majority of my focuses are on smaller businesses that kind of need that HR focus and help and guidance, which is a lot inside of the landscape industry. As we all know, we have people that wear multiple hats within the landscape industry. So, yeah.
So thank you for joining us. I still remember the first time I met you, and you were just getting started in HR. And I think through our mutual experience of growing and working through the landscape industry, we faced a lot of challenges especially in HR. So, I really just want to start off there with you today is like, from your perspective, what are the biggest challenges that HR professionals face in the landscape industry?
Yeah, so I think it's a really big question. Probably there's a long list of challenges that different organizations face. I can tell you for sure that one of the number one things that I see that is pretty consistent is, like I mentioned in my introduction, is people wearing multiple hats, right? You might have one person that's not an HR expert doing accounting, doing front desk, whatever it might be, more specifically for these smaller starter up organizations. The other thing is, resources. What sort of resources do you have within your organization? Are you able to utilize these resources? Do you have it budgeted? Where's the organization going? All of that future planning are things that I believe are issues that do come up. And lastly, one of the hot topics is staffing, right? That is a huge thing within the landscape industry. And obviously we'll get into that a little bit later on and more in detail, but that's obviously a big topic to discuss.
Yeah, well, I want to dig into some of those answers because, I think we both experience being one-man bands, right? Or one-woman bands, if you will. But that single HR team, right? It brings a lot of challenges. I know that I personally struggled sometimes with nobody speaks my language. Like nobody understands HR and we bring a certain stigma from corporate America.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your experience in being a one person department and the challenges that brought you.
I think that the challenges that I had by being like a one person department was enough time, right? How do you organize yourself and stay on top of different tasks and obviously complete your job to the best of its abilities? With one, being compliant, two, making sure that you're making everybody happy and getting whatever it is that they need, and then three, being a resource for employees as well, right? Because HR is more than just a paper pusher per se. Yeah. And I think that's probably the misconcept that people have is that HR is just policies and paper pushers. I have never been that person. It's not my personality. And Barrett, I know that that's not you also. And a lot of the things that I have gotten, questions in the past have been after I've done presentations or spoken publicly is always, how are you like not the most typical HR person? Like, how did you establish your role? Where did you think that, your role needed to be? And a lot of that was just really realizing what the organization needed, right? And what fit the organization. And with realizing what your organization needs, you're kind of able to mold your role into what it should be to kind of help out the organization, right? So, the challenges that I had was I was never in the landscape industry, so I didn't know or understand. So one of the things that I really thrived on and like doing was getting to know the people, right? Getting to know the people and realizing what is it that they do? What are their jobs? Like, yes, I can read their job descriptions, but like, let me actually visually see it, right? Let me see how it works. I might not know how to use a certain piece of equipment, but I can visualize it and see and understand, okay, like it needs to be somebody that's physically capable of doing it, right? Which is compliance, sorry. And two, like, okay, I know now that I need to hire someone that is able to do this, and I can put the job description and what I visually observed together. So it took a lot in really understanding what these positions actually do, and then teaming up with leadership and realizing what is it that the organization needs, where are we going as an organization, right? And the other thing is like, I had to prove my point. Like, yes, I'm a female and I might not know anything about the industry specifically when I first started, but I showed up for rollout. I showed up, I talked to the field crews. I speak English and Spanish, so obviously that was an advantage as well. And I know we'll lead later on in our conversation into, connecting the office and the field together, but that was another one of my tasks and challenges that I had to figure out.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. Coming from software and private travel and professional sports, I had no idea what I was stepping into when I got into the landscaping industry. So like you, I really had to immerse myself in it. And I think that when I look back in how to become successful in HR and add the most value, not only in a tactical sense, mm-hmm. but in order to be transformative for the organization, you have to immerse yourself in it. You have to be there for rollout. You have to understand those subcultures between office and the field. And, that internal communication struggle is something that, as somebody who's not bilingual, I really had to learn how to communicate with people who I not only didn't speak HR with, but I didn't speak their native language as well. So, I think that as we look at being, in, single seats for quite a while, right, wearing a lot of hats, you can feel like you're out on an island a lot. And when nobody on your leadership team understands why you're doing this or agrees with it or thinks that HR should be in the room, I want to turn over to what can companies do to support their HR departments? What are some of the things that happened for you that made you feel supported, that kept you going in your role?
Yeah, so I think that having a really good owner is definitely great. a good support system where, the owner or even your peer is going to be able, your peer group's going to be able to support you in your decisions, or, hey, can I run this idea by you? Do you think that's crazy? Do you kind of agree, disagree? Surveying out. I mean, I used to do that too, kind of surveying out with the managers. Hey, do you think if I do this, the team would receive it well? What are your thoughts? Is that a yay or a nay, whatever it might be? I always wanted to make sure that everyone was going to be good. Granted, you're not going to make everyone happy, but overall, a good feedback experience. The other thing is listen to them. They know what they're talking about. They're the ones sitting in and seeing what's happening day in and day out, especially if that means, hey, I need a bigger team. I'm ready for that. Let me show you why. And just seeing what the ROI is on that is important as well.
Yeah. I think one of the things that was a big step forward for me in that was when I was given a seat at the table. Mm-hmm. And it actually really helped me understand why I could or could not execute or do some of the things I wanted to do. Because,
yes.
Like I said, I came from software. You didn't wake up before 9:30, let alone be rolled out in the yard at 7.
Before the sun's out.
Yeah, right? Like, that was crazy for me, but understanding strategy and what the business goals were really helped me build a strategy that also helped the company, but supported exactly what you said, and being able to ride along with managers to understand what they're seeing, what they're doing, what their job is.
What are their challenges?
Yeah, exactly. So that I could build something for them, and getting that feedback from employees and team members is invaluable. But you touched on it first. You got to act on it, right? But one of the things that I think I found, and I'd love to hear your perspective on it, is when my job was more focused on HR, I was most successful. Not when I was tasked with wearing hats, too many hats outside of what my normal job duty was, right? We all understand in small business, you got to wear a lot of hats, but as you grow and as you get support, it was being more focused and more direct on your job to make an even bigger impact. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your story and what your experience was with that.
Yeah. So when I first started off wearing multiple hats, just like you said, it was rather difficult to focus on one specific task when you have multiple different tasks going on. Obviously, that was the organizational needs, right? I needed and I understood that I had to wear multiple hats, but internally in myself, and I worked with my owner on like figuring out career path and like where it was that I wanted to be and what my expertise were going to be useful for in the future for the organization. And so I think with having that kind of gave me the hope of like, okay, like I'm going to eventually be able to get out of this. Like once we have the resources and budget, we're going to be able to get this person to do this and this person to do that. So I think that really helped me a ton. Once I did get into my HR director role within the industry, I was more strategizing, right? I was more strategizing, and I was sitting at the seat of the table with owners and leadership and figuring out where we were going as the organization. Now, prior to that, I might have not had a seat at the table, but I was still speaking to leadership and speaking to ownership about what I thought the needs were and what I thought was going on. So I think it's important for you to voice and not stay quiet about like what you think is happening and what you're understanding. And a way to do that is like, you're the resource, you're there for the people in the organization. So like voice whatever it is that you think is going on.
Well, you bring up an interesting point. I'd love to dig in a little bit deeper on that transition between sitting outside the room versus sitting in the room. Tell me a little bit about how that changed your perspective on your strategy, your recommendations, and even just the overall organization as a whole.
Yeah. So I think, you're more into the weeds, right? When I was outside of the table, I guess you could say, or outside of the room, once I was at the seat of the table, I was able to see bigger picture stuff, right? And really understand where the organization was going, whether that was 3 years, 5 year outlook, whatever that might be. So I eventually did grow a team underneath me, an HR team underneath me. So, with coaching and mentoring, I was able to coach and mentor that person underneath me of, don't worry about it. I'm telling you to do this specifically because there's a bigger picture of how things are happening. So I was kind of able to tell that person, hey, you kind of need to be in the weeds while I'm out of the weeds, but I promise you we're all rowing in the right direction for a reason. So I think the transition was amazing for me personally to be able to do that, because I can get into the weeds if needed. However, I don't like to be too much into the weeds, and I do like to analyze, but I don't like to overanalyze as well. I much rather prefer to make a decision and be done and over with. Whereas, with having and leading somebody underneath the HR department underneath me, that person was kind of able to be like, wait, Nubia, hold up. Are you sure that this is what we're thinking of? And then, they were able to test me in figuring out what was happening. So for me, it was a positive thing to be able to do. I liked it. I liked being able to voice my opinion to the rest of the leadership team. I liked being heard by the leadership team. And most important, one of the things that I very much preached on was, if we're going to ask for opinions, then we need to make a change. We can't just ask for opinions and not make a change and say that we are going to change certain things and then just be done with it and forget about it. Because that looks bad on us, and then people aren't going to trust us.
Yeah, it's almost worse, right? To ask for somebody's opinion and then not act on it. I couldn't agree with you more on that. Well, I think that where we go from here is, we're in the room, we have a seat at the table. Life didn't get any easier or less busy, right? And so I think one of the biggest challenges our industry faces is that high turnover. It's a manual labor workforce. Depending on where you are, it's either really hot or really cold or somewhere in between, but it can be physically taxing. And so, for me, I'd love to hear from you of what are some of the big things for you that allowed you to build a culture that reduced that turnover and really make it a top place to work, if you will.
Yeah. So I keep going back on this because I think it's super important, but having that relationship with the people, right? And like I mentioned earlier, having that organic recruitment. And HR is not the only person that recruits. Everybody's a recruiter, right? Yep. If you're out somewhere and you're wearing the name of your organization, guess what? You better be careful because somebody's watching you and you're recruiting for your organization. Whatever happens, you're wearing your organization's name, right? I'm very big on that. You're driving around your truck, your company truck, whatever it is. Yes, it's a nice free billboard to be able to have, but hey, don't forget you're recruiting for your organization as well, right? So that was part of it, right? The other part of it was having an established referral bonus, right? So internally, having a referral bonus was a huge help for us. The other thing too was that once we had that good established culture and that referral bonus, we were able to budget out a recruiter within the HR department. Now, I know and I understand that this is not something that every organization can do or has the means to be able to do that. But I will say that that was something that helped us a ton. And by having somebody that just focuses on new hires, orientation, recruiting, that was their core focus, and that was able to help my shift to go into the strategizing, right? So having this person be out in the community, that's another important thing. These people are not on Indeed or LinkedIn all the time. You need to be out into the community, go out to different career fairs, job fairs, different community events, playgrounds, you name it. grocery stores, whatever it might be. Being out there within the community and having our name out there was another huge major win for us. And ideally what that did for us was we had a stack of applicants. So it was easier for us to not be on this like thing of not being able to recruit or find people. So I know that one of the other things that people have challenges with are the language. So if you do have somebody that is in the field that does speak both languages, see if you can have them come help you with like recruitment and like pay them maybe something extra to see how they can help you. I know not every organization has somebody that can speak perfect English and Spanish to help out, but if you have somebody from your team speaking about your organization and, seeing somebody that like works in the field out there recruiting, they're able to relate more with that person. So that's also a positive.
Yeah. That employee experience, right? Mm-hmm. Having somebody dedicated to focus on it, really making sure that it goes smoothly, right? Because it's funny that you say that, because I always touted myself as the culture champion, mm-hmm. and wanting to make sure that employee experience was second to none, and that the dedication in finding the right people and making sure they get onboarded, I think is the biggest part of it too, mm-hmm. because you can find the right person, but you can drop the ball on day one and all of a sudden they're gone on day 3, right? Yes. So there's a lot of things that go into making sure that we're prepared, consistent, and evolving that practice. And, something that you mentioned earlier too was, you built yourself a career path to help you get through it. Did you guys have a career path internally that showed what growth looked like for your employees?
We did. And that wasn't established until later on. As the organization was growing, we came to the realization that career leaders don't happen naturally. I don't know if you know that.
And from trees?
No, it would be lovely if you could, though. So while we realized that career leaders are so difficult to find, and unless you're paying a lot of money for these people from other organizations, and then you're poaching, and then that brings up a whole nother ordeal, right? We needed to establish an organization training. So I did a whole entire training for crew leaders and their career path as to how it was that they needed to get to whatever management roles it was that they were going to be looking at. So we knew that the immediate need was crew leaders, right? So we had these ongoing training sessions with these crew leaders, which eventually established a career path for these positions. And so it was like, if you have A, B, and C, you're able to move up to the next career path, whatever that might be. Not only that, but that was good for increases. We were able to look back and see, okay, Susan was able to do this certification and came in for these trainings. So they definitely deserve a raise. They showed that they were interested. They're invested in the organization. We definitely want to keep this person. And a lot of the times, sometimes we didn't have them or a position to be able for them to move up, right? But it was a lot of conversations of, we don't have a position right now for you. However, we do think that we will have an established position for you in the near future or within whatever days. It's a lot of planning and working with the operations team and figuring out what's going on and what's happening. And I think that goes back to why it's important for HR to have a seat at the table, because you can understand and hear and see what's happening so that you can go back and realize, okay, I need to start establishing these career paths or these goals for these positions.
Well, you connected the dots that I was going to connect for myself too, of right. When you have that foresight, it's easier to explain the why, right? Mm-hmm. Hey, and the how, right? Why we don't have a position for you right now. We need to get to this size revenue. We need to add this many more clients so that we can add another truck. After we add another truck, we have another crew, which means we have enough crews for a superintendent. That's where we see you going, right?
Yes.
And when people can see the path, they're more likely to stay on it.
Yes.
And, that's that culture from promoting from within too. And, I loved how your story began with, we started with a training program, not a career path.
Mm-hmm.
The training program led into a career path,
Yep.
which allowed you to promote from within more consistently. And, I'm a big fan of promoting from within whenever it's possible.
Absolutely.
It's not always the right thing to do every time, but, what effects did you see that it had on your company's culture, and why is it so important?
Yeah, so I think it shows the people that it's an achievable goal, right?
Yeah.
And that the organization's not just looking to hire from the outside. It shows that if you work hard, put in your work, and do what you're supposed to do, and show your interest and wanting to move up in the organization, because that's also an important part, then I can get there. Like, let me go talk to my manager and figure out how I can get there and how can I establish this. So again, it shows them an achievable goal, that they're able to do it. And I would say that it gives a positive overall culture impact. And again, it just helps naturally with the recruiting.
Yeah. There's two things that stood out to me too from what you said is, after building the training program, the career path came naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it also shows employees that the training works.
Correct.
You do the training, you can be promoted, right? I have found that a lot of times that those empty promises of, hey, we need training, we need training, we need training, they do the training, and then there's nothing at the end of the rainbow for them but more work, right? And there's, when you don't see that the juice is worth the squeeze, I'm not participating in training. I'm not engaging in that training that we both know does not get built overnight or with a wave of a wand, right?
Yeah,
so
I wish it was that easy.
I know, right? If I was Harry Potter, it would be a lot easier. But, Nubia, it's kind of crazy how fast time goes when you and I get together, right? We've bounced ideas off each other for years, and the time has flown by. So I know that we are looking to get a few more questions in here, but also I know that this is going to be something where I'm definitely going to need you to come back on and dig into these a little bit more, because I think both you and I can sit here and talk about everything that HR does and everything. And I want to kind of wrap up with two more questions, right? And one of them is, we've talked about how much we value HR as HR professionals and how much we see it. But I think it can really become a competitive advantage to your company if you have somebody who's dedicated to it and focused. So tell me a little bit about how owners or executive teams can invest in HR to really bring that competitive advantage to the forefront.
Yeah. So anybody can cut grass, right? Anybody can do all of these different things that our organization does. The only thing that can set us apart from others are the service and the people, right?
Yep.
So I think the service and the people are areas we tend to focus a lot on the service and not on the people aspect of it. And I think once you truly do invest in the people, you'll see how the service and the people can elevate your organization. One of the things that I kind of strived on and really got pushed myself, my inner self, was to get my certification. And I was like, like these people get their landscape contractor's license or their horticulture license. Like, what can I do to like elevate myself to the same level of, their certifications that they're getting? So I really worked hard studying for a whole year to get my certification, which is no easy task. I know how difficult that test is to take. So that was one of the things that I did, and really utilizing my resources around me. I know that there's different peer groups. I know that you are in one organization right now that has peer groups, but like leaning on these different peer groups to help you elevate yourself as well. These peer groups have a ton of good information that they can help you, and they've been there and they know how to get there and can elevate you and your team to wherever it is that it needs to go. And bringing in somebody externally instead of your organization to make you see things differently is don't be scared by that. That's a good thing, because you want to be different. You want to have that competitiveness of like, what sets us apart from every other landscape organization? What are we doing? Well, we have a specific HR team that does this, and let me tell you how we're different from this organization, and they have these certain certifications. That brings and elevates your organization.
Nubia, you just gave me goosebumps, because I still remember when I got the opportunity to sit for my SHRM SEP, and knowing that my organization was going to pay for it.
Yeah.
It made me feel invested in, but it circles back to, if you take care of your people, they'll take care of your customers.
Yes.
But I look at it as, who's the person or the department who takes care of the people, right? And the world is changing very fast. We could dive into the massive burnout and turnover in HR departments during COVID because of the strain and the lack of training and everything across we saw in our profession. But it goes back to you take the time to invest in those HR professionals and certifications and training. And also, one of the things I think about is, you got to have time to go to these peer groups and network. You can't be overloaded and buried with administrative tasks that, while they're important, we have to leverage that experience. And, for, turning on my HR finance hat, right? It's leveraging that hourly rate. You don't want to spend too much money on somebody filling out paperwork when they could really be going out and getting much more valuable content with networking and figuring out the how a lot quicker than trying to figure out themselves in a dark room in the corner, right?
Yeah.
So
we can get into compliance and how much that will cost you if you have the wrong person in the seat dealing with that.
Well, and I think that's, for me, we have so much more to talk about. And, I would love to have you back on another episode so that we can get into that transformative versus transactional HR. We can get into, culture and supporting it. We can even dig into, hey, how do you level up an HR department, let alone the value of it in the first one? So, Nubia, thank you so much for coming in. As we wrap up, we're going to go through our big three takeaways, right? First one, obviously, to me is HR can really be a competitive advantage to your company. It's more than parties, paperwork, and payroll. Secondly, HR really needs that seat at the table to be most effective in helping connect strategy and execution. And lastly, we talked about it a lot today too, a little bit, is HR is not just a person, it's a team that grows with it, right? You can only do so much as a single person, but as the company grows, that team needs to grow. So thank you so much for having us in. I know that as a HR consultant, you're few and far between. So why don't you tell our listeners a little bit of where they can find you and HR in Bloom?
Yes. So thank you again for having me. You can reach me at www.hrinbloom.com, or you can connect with me via LinkedIn, Nubia Gutierrez. You should be able to find me through there. And again, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Roots of Success, brought to you by the subject matter experts at McFarland Stanford. Have a question you want our coaches to tackle in a future episode? You could submit that at mcfarlandstanford.com/podcast.
And to find more helpful content from McFarland Stanford, follow us on X, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. If this or any of our episodes have piqued your interest in ACE peer groups, we encourage you to join us at ACE Discovery. Just check out the events tab at mcfarlandstanford.com. This is Jason New, co-founder and principal at McFarland Stanford. We'll see you next time.